My parents gave Dylan access to credit cards in my name, then blamed me when they got maxed out paying for his rehab, his bail, and whatever else he needed while spiraling. When I confronted them about the identity theft, Mom slapped me across the face and screamed, "You think you're better than us just because you ran off to college?" I didn't answer. I just stood there, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. That was 2 years ago. Last week, she posted a TikTok sobbing over her angel son Dylan. She didn't mention Liam's funeral. Not once. I idolized Dylan growing up. Couldn't get enough of him. And I thought Liam looked up to me the same way. But Dylan never had time for me. Not unless he needed something. Even then, he barely made eye contact. Our mom had untreated thyroid issues that made her a whirlwind. One day she'd be buying me ice cream and racing me through splash parks like we were best friends. The next, she'd be screaming at me in the car and whipping my legs with a belt she kept tucked beside the emergency brake because I brought home a 99 on a test instead of 100. I thought Dylan would understand how unsteady life felt, but he kept his distance like my pain embarrassed him. I gave up trying until my 7th birthday. That year, Dad, rarely home thanks to constant double shifts at the port, showed up with a bright red bike. It was the nicest thing anyone had ever done for me. He even taught me how to ride. For that brief moment, I felt like life was okay. The next day, I asked Dylan if he wanted to try it out. His face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. I thought, finally, maybe we were connecting. But then he took the bike and smashed it full speed into a wall, bent the frame, twisted the wheel. Just like that, it was gone. When I ran to him, crying, not because I was hurt, but because my heart was, he punched me in the chest and hissed, "Shut the hell up unless you want Mom and Dad to hear." I stopped trying after that. It was too painful to keep reaching for someone who only ever hurt me. A year later, Liam was born, and I made myself a promise. He'd never feel what I felt. From the moment he could speak, I poured every ounce of love I had into him, encouraged him, cheered him on. At 4 years old, he'd burst into my room wearing Dylan's too big clothes, announcing fashion show, and twirling like a confused chicken. I clapped every time, told him he looked drippy, even when he looked like a sleep-deprived scarecrow. Liam's awkward phase lasted well into his teens. It's a miracle he wasn't bullied, but maybe that's because I made his world feel safe, kind, like he was enough. Eventually, Liam moved into my room, not because we were that close, but because Dylan had become something else entirely. Not just difficult, dangerous, addicted, violent. One night, he came home reeking of weed and rage, yelling into a megaphone he'd probably stolen. "Yo, how's everyone doing tonight?" That was his thing. He'd annoy our parents into submission, keep them up for hours until they were desperate enough to hand over money just to make him leave. I did what I could to protect Liam. Earplugs, rides to my friend's house, whatever it took. But it wasn't enough. The night I came home and saw Mom covering a black eye with foundation, a black eye Dylan gave her, I broke. I cornered Dad in the hallway. "He has to go? Now. Get a restraining order. He's not just a screw-up, he's dangerous." Dad, ever the quiet one, just nodded. But days passed. Then weeks. Then months. Nothing changed. Then, the impossible happened. I got an offer to transfer to my dream school. Across the country. I remember sobbing into my pillow while Liam slept next to me, knowing that leaving meant abandoning him to this mess. But I convinced myself it was the only way. If I could graduate, land a better job, I could build something. A home. A future. A way out for both of us. When I told Liam I was leaving, I expected tears. Begging. Something. But all I got was, "I'm happy for you, Riley." Deadpan. I left that fall. It felt like I was leaving my own child behind. We stayed in touch. He told me Dylan went to rehab. That things were finally okay. He was in college now, too. So when my friend said her sister needed a place to stay while visiting Silver Pine, I offered our family apartment. My parents were a mess, but they were never hostile to guests. She stayed in our old room. And then it happened. Dylan came home. Drunk. High. He kicked open the bedroom door and destroyed the last bit of peace I thought I had left. I answered on the second ring, heart already in my throat. Liam's voice came through the phone, shaky, older, somehow. "Dylan hurt her," he said. "Sarah's sister. The one staying in our room." His words came in fragments. Crying, shouting, the door slamming, Dylan disappearing, drug wrappers everywhere. I booked the first red-eye flight back home. While I packed, Sarah called me sobbing, asking how could I have let this happen. "You sent her into that house. How could you trust them?" I had no answers. Just the crushing weight in my chest as I threw whatever clothes I could into a bag. The hospital waiting room felt like another planet when I arrived 6 hours later. Mom sat stiff in a plastic chair, talking to anyone who would listen about how it must have been a misunderstanding. Dad stared at the floor, elbows on his knees, saying nothing. Same script. Different crisis. Liam pulled me aside by the vending machines. His face had aged years since I left for college. Wordlessly, he pulled out his phone and showed me folders of saved videos, security cam footage from the hallway outside our old room. Dylan's rage on full display. Paranoia. Drug-fueled rants. Screaming matches. Liam had been documenting it all. Preparing for this. Maya refused the kit at first. The nurse tried to explain why it mattered for prosecution, but she just turned away, silent. Sarah held her hand. I stood in the doorway, frozen, watching a family I loved fall apart, because of my family. When the police arrived, they looked skeptical, until Liam showed them the videos. Their entire tone changed. Suddenly, they were taking notes, copying files, asking questions. A detective pulled Liam aside for a longer conversation. I watched as my parents sat huddled in their usual pattern of denial and avoidance. Then Dylan messaged our family group chat, playing the victim. He asked how we could believe some stranger over your own brother. Mom lit up like a kid at Christmas. Dad just stared off again, pretending to be made of stone. That night, Liam and I sat in his car outside the hospital. He told me the truth. Dylan had never been in rehab. That whole story, a lie. Our parents lied to keep me in college, to pretend everything was normal. The betrayal burned more than anything Dylan had ever done. Sarah came back the next morning like a storm. She cornered my parents in the hallway and told them, loudly, that their failure to act had enabled a monster. Mom tried to defend herself. Sarah shut her down before the first excuse landed. Hospital security had to step in. We later found out the hospital's security footage from that night had been mysteriously corrupted. A system glitch, they claimed. Too convenient. Without that, everything came down to Maya's statement and Liam's evidence. Liam explained why he'd recorded it all. He knew I'd blame myself for not being here, for leaving. He needed to prove this wasn't my fault. That Dylan spiral had been coming whether I stayed or not. The next morning, Dylan came back. He stormed into the apartment at dawn, demanded money for a lawyer. When our parents hesitated, he grabbed Liam by the collar and shook him. Mom immediately offered her wedding ring to pawn. Dad. He rolled over on the couch and pretended to be asleep. Liam recorded the whole thing from his pocket. When Dylan left with the jewelry, I snapped. I told our parents everything I'd held back for years. The fear, the violence, the way they sacrificed us just to avoid confronting Dylan. Mom slapped me before I could finish. You abandoned this family. You don't get to judge us from your little dorm room. Later that night, Maya finally agreed to press charges. Sarah and I sat with her as she gave her formal statement. Her voice was distant, monotone, but she got through it. Brave as hell. Then came the next bombshell. Dylan's dealer messaged me on Facebook. He said Dylan owed $15,000. Your family will pay, one way or another. He listed Liam's class schedule, just to make the threat clear. That night, Liam finally broke. He confessed he'd been quietly paying Dylan's smaller debts out of his own college fund, just trying to keep us safe. His savings were almost gone. The landlord posted an eviction notice. Too many complaints. Maya's assault was the final straw. Dylan's cruelty broke something in me. But Liam? Liam had been a quiet soldier in this war the whole time. Recording, planning, protecting, while pretending to be okay. My mom blamed me for letting Maya stay with them, as if her being there caused Dylan's attack. While they were out meeting with a lawyer, I searched Dylan's room. What I found next changed everything. When I searched Dylan's room, I expected maybe drugs, maybe cash stashed somewhere. What I found was worse. Photos of unconscious women, hidden behind a shoebox of used needles and wrappers. My hands shook as I took pictures of everything. At the station, Detective Chin pulled me aside. She told me Dylan had been reported 3 times before for assault, but no charges had ever stuck. He picked his victims carefully, stayed just out of reach. Until now. A week later, my tuition payment bounced. That's how I found out my college fund was gone. Drained. Mom and Dad had used it to pay for Dylan's fancy lawyer, without even telling me. Dylan made bail and immediately broke the restraining order. Showed up outside Maya's hotel, yelling her name like some kind of performance. She locked herself in the bathroom, trembling, while Sarah sat outside the door, helpless. Liam tried to stop him. Dylan punched him. Again and again. When I got there, Liam was being loaded into an ambulance. His face barely recognizable. Dylan was arrested again. And still, our parents were talking about bailing him out again. The hospital bills came in while Liam recovered. My savings? Already decimated from helping with therapy. Now I was expected to pay for this too, because Liam had been hurt defending my friend. It got worse. My card was declined at the pharmacy. I called the credit company. Then another. Turns out, my parents had opened credit accounts in my name. Gave Dylan access to all of them. Sarah's family hired a lawyer. They were considering suing my entire family. I couldn't blame them. Our friendship hung on a thread. The lawyer wanted depositions. And suddenly, the trauma I spent years trying to bury was being printed out in legal paperwork. Dylan's lawyer painted me as the villain. Said I set him up by inviting Maya to stay in a house I knew was unstable. They called it reckless endangerment. They said I abandoned Dylan and turned the family against him. I wanted to throw up. Liam got out of the hospital, but he wasn't the same. He flinched at every sudden movement, jumped at noises, checked the locks 3-4 times a night. He stopped going to class altogether. The bright kid I left behind was gone, and in his place was someone scared to sleep with the lights off. I found him a therapist. I had to, even if it meant I couldn't afford a lawyer to fight the identity theft. I pulled the last of my savings and sent it toward the only person who might help Liam feel safe again. Then Maya tried to take her own life. Sarah called me from the hospital, her voice hollow. She found Maya unconscious in the hotel bathroom. The note she left behind said everything. How no one believed her, how the system protects predators, how it all felt like drowning. I sat on the floor of my dorm room, rereading her words, choking on the guilt. My family had poisoned everything. The choice between defending myself and saving Liam wasn't even a choice. I let the credit card companies win by default. The debt stuck. Then Dylan's friends started their online campaign. They found my social media, my email, even the restaurant where I work part-time. My new address showed up in comment sections, along with threats. Traitors get what they deserve. Campus security started patrolling more often, but I still moved my bed away from the window. Then Mom pulled the final card, an intervention. I walked into our childhood home and found everyone, aunts, cousins, old neighbors, waiting. They took turns lecturing me about loyalty, family, blood being thicker than water. How I torn the family apart. I sat there, in the middle of their circle, like I was on trial. Like I was the one who'd done something unforgivable. Then Liam handed me his phone. He'd recorded one of Mom's meltdowns. She said it all. How she knew Dylan was dangerous. How she'd covered for him for years. Paid off neighbors. Lied to police. Because family comes first. Liam's hands were shaking. I'm giving it to the DA, he said. It's time. We both knew what it meant. That we were cutting the last threads to our parents. Forever. A few days later, I came home from class and found my apartment door off its hinges. Everything trashed. Spray painted across my bedroom wall. Payment due. Family debt. Rico's men had come by. The college filed a report, took photos. But we all knew they couldn't protect me from Dylan's debt. Not really. The school called me into a meeting. Quiet tone, polite words. But their message was clear. My family's criminal history made me a liability. They hinted maybe I'd be more comfortable somewhere else. A different campus, far away. Somewhere I couldn't be a problem. 2 days later, Dad asked to meet for coffee. He hadn't spoken to me directly since Zeke's second arrest. He slid an envelope across the table. $50,000 in cash. No words at first, just that. Then, let it go, he said. Let us deal with Zeke privately. Don't destroy the family over this. His hands trembled. He started rambling about tradition, family reputation, how we don't air things out to outsiders. I looked at the cash. I could have paid off the tuition, the medical bills, the credit card debt he and Mom racked up in my name. But instead, I wore a wire to our next meeting. Everything poured out of him like a dam finally cracked. How they'd covered for Zeke since he was a teenager. The cousin he heard at 15. A neighbor's daughter at 17. Hush money. Deleted files. Stories rewritten. That recording was enough. The FBI took Zeke into custody while my parents were arrested for conspiracy and obstruction. I watched from across the street as Mom screamed betrayal, and Dad, silent as ever, was let out in cuffs. Neighbors gathered. Some stared. Some filmed. The people who once brought us holiday cookies now saw us for what we were. Extended family turned on me and Dana fast. We were traitors. Ungrateful. Choosing strangers over blood. Cousins I grew up with posted angry TikToks. Aunts called to spit disgust. In 48 hours, every branch of our family tree cut us off. But Rico hadn't forgotten us. We had 2 days to come up with $15,000 or face consequences. Dana's scholarship had already been pulled because of the investigation. We sat in my car, counting change, trying to stretch pennies into a lifeline. We were thousands short. Then came the DEA. Turns out Zeke wasn't just using from our apartment. He was dealing. The evidence was everywhere. Baggies in the freezer. Scales in the kitchen. Client names scribbled in my old notebooks. Mom and Dad had been taking a cut. The apartment had become a distribution hub. And Dana and I had been sleeping one room over the whole time. Suddenly, we weren't just broke, we were frozen. Bank accounts locked. Assets seized. Even Mom's jewelry was tagged as evidence. Then Grandma visited. She sat on the edge of my dorm bed, hands folded in her lap like nothing was wrong, and calmly admitted she'd known everything. Every victim. Every bribe. She'd been the one telling Mom and Dad to protect Zeke. Family first, she said. Reputation matters more than outsiders' feelings. The trial date was set. Zeke's lawyer filed for a separate proceeding, said grouping him with our parents would bias the jury. The judge agreed. Zeke's case went first. Our parents were placed on house arrest, while Dana and I were evicted. Our landlord didn't want to get tangled in federal asset freezes. We packed what little we had into my car and lived out of it. Parked behind a 24-hour gym. Showers. Vending machines. Homework by flashlight. It was humiliating, but still safer than staying home. Rico's warning hung in the air like a noose. Meanwhile, Sarah's family moved forward with their civil suit. I was listed as a co-defendant, along with my parents. Their lawyer argued that I'd knowingly put Maya in danger. My insurance wouldn't cover it because of the criminal charges. I faced millions in potential damages. Then Dana broke. I found him collapsed in a gas station bathroom, unconscious, empty pill bottles scattered around. I drove him to the hospital myself, hazard lights flashing, screaming the whole way. I held his hand and whispered that we'd survive this. But I didn't believe it. Zeke's trial began with his lawyer spinning a story. He painted Zeke as a victim. Of bad parenting. Of me. Of the world. Said prison would destroy a troubled soul who just needed help. He blamed Mom and Dad for enabling. Blamed me for leaving. Blamed everyone, except Zeke. I watched from the gallery as the courtroom twisted Zeke into something unrecognizable, a victim. The defense painted him as misunderstood, a broken man failed by his family. Lila's testimony was calm, but the pain behind it was raw. She described what he'd done that night in terrifying clarity. How it broke her, how it changed everything. The defense attorney was ruthless. He brought up her dating history, her old selfies, even a caption she once posted about being too trusting. As if any of that justified what Zeke did. I saw doubt bloom in the jurors' eyes, softening just where they should have been firm. When I took the stand, I spoke about the years of chaos. About how Mom once covered a black eye with concealer and pretended nothing happened. About the screaming, the smashed doors, the nights Dana slept in the bathtub just to feel safe. I told them how Zeke was never reformed, just hidden. Every time I spoke, he stared me down, mouthing silent threats across the courtroom. Mom testified for him, of course. She said I always hated Zeke, that I was jealous, that I twisted the truth to make him look bad. She cried on cue, talked about family and forgiveness. She made herself the saint, and me the traitor. The jury deadlocked on the worst charge. In the end, they only convicted him for the drugs. 3 years. With good behavior, he'd be out in 18 months. Lila collapsed when she heard. Sarah caught her before she hit the floor. I just sat there, hollowed out. 2 days later, Dana was jumped in broad daylight by Rico's guys. They broke his ribs and his nose. No words, just fists. A reminder, we were still $5,000 short. I sold everything, my laptop, my textbooks, even grandma's necklace. Still not enough. Rico gave me one final deadline. Then the news came. Zeke was attacked in prison. An inmate whose sister had been one of his victims recognized him. Zeke survived, but the damage was permanent, paralyzed from the waist down. When I heard, I didn't feel relief. Just a kind of numb. My parents weren't numb. They sued me, claimed my testimony led to Zeke's assault. Emotional distress. The audacity felt surreal, but the lawsuit was real. I filed for bankruptcy at 23. The debts from the identity theft, hospital bills, legal fees, it all came crashing down. College was gone. My future, too. Dana dropped out and started working night shifts at a warehouse. We moved into a studio with rats and broken heating. Shared one mattress. He'd sleep while I worked the morning shift at a diner. Then we'd swap. Survival wasn't romantic. It was just the absence of total collapse. When the civil judgment came, it didn't even surprise me. Sarah's family won $2 million. But they'd never see it. Mom and Dad had shielded every asset, leaving me as the only one left with future earnings. Every paycheck I'd ever earned was already gone. I did what I had to. Motel rooms near the airport. Lies about who I was. Trauma as a story for the kinds of men who paid to pretend they were helping. Every dollar went to Rico's crew, buying Dana and me one more week of safety. 3 months later, Mom was out of minimum security and posting on TikTok about surviving betrayal. She was now a motivational speaker, monetizing our collapse. Faith through family hardship, she called it. She sold ebooks, recorded podcasts, filmed herself crying next to Dad's grave. He died of heart failure during a court hearing. Mom live-streamed the funeral, said everything would go to Zeke, per some handwritten will Dad left behind. Dana and I weren't mentioned once. Zeke was released early, 18 months. Rolled out of prison in a wheelchair, posting Instagram stories about injustice and healing. Within a week, he was violating parole, talking to underage girls online again. His officer didn't even blink, too overwhelmed, too used to stories like his. Then a woman messaged me, said her 12-year-old daughter had been talking to a man online. He claimed to be a paralyzed survivor of family abuse. She sent me screenshots, profile photos. It was Zeke. The message came from a mother whose 12-year-old daughter had been chatting with someone online, someone claiming to be a paralyzed victim of family abuse. The profile used Zeke's face. His manipulation hadn't changed. When I tried reporting it, the detective barely hid her annoyance. No proof of contact, she said. Just accusations from a bitter sister. Meanwhile, Dana started dealing. Just small stuff. To help us scrape rent after my income dipped too low. He used contacts from his warehouse shift. I watched him slip into someone harder, colder. The gentle kid I protected was gone. Replaced by someone who couldn't afford to feel. My own past caught up when a client from my college days recognized me. Screenshots of my escort ads spread through group chats like wildfire. Classmates mocked me. Didn't she want to be a lawyer or something? Mom used it for content. My daughter, once full of promise, lost to sin. She cried in car videos with dramatic captions and gospel music overlays. Rico's death should have meant freedom. Instead, his debt collectors sold our names to someone worse. Someone who wanted it all now, or in blood. We had 72 hours to find $12,000. Dana ramped up fast. Bigger deals. More risk. I turned a blind eye to the scales in the bathroom, the strangers in our hallway. We were both drowning, just in different currents. Then came the footage. A parking garage, Dana handing off pills. Someone had snitched. The police came at dawn. I watched from the doorway as they cuffed him, calculating a bail I didn't have. The public defender said the best case scenario was 5 to 7 years. Then came the call. Mia was gone. On the anniversary of the assault, she'd taken her life. Sarah's voice was hollow. Her family banned me from the funeral. Mia had written, I died that night. My body just didn't get the memo. 3 days later, I walked into traffic. Not on purpose. Not exactly. Just tired. I woke up in a psych ward. Another hospital bill I couldn't pay. I spent 3 months inside, playing the part of recovery well enough to get out. Smiling, nodding, taking the meds. When I was discharged, Dana was already sentenced. 5 years. Zeke had testified against him in exchange for leniency on his parole violations. Mom thrived while I was gone. Wrote a book. Did interviews. Talked about her hero son in a wheelchair and her criminal daughter. She used our names, our trauma, every detail repackaged for profit. That's when I found Zeke's cloud storage. He'd accidentally synced it with an old email I still had access to. Inside, videos. Lila's assault. And worse, material involving minors. This time, the detective believed me. She launched a full investigation. Zeke was arrested again. The laptop alone had enough to bury him. Mom, of course, claimed I'd planted it all. Zeke didn't make it to arraignment. He stockpiled Mom's painkillers and took them the night before. In his note, he blamed me for everything. His paralysis. The family collapse. He even listed names of victims no one had heard of. Girls who never came forward. Mom had me arrested that same night. Claimed I'd murdered Zeke. It didn't hold. Surveillance, autopsy, prescriptions, all cleared me. But she didn't stop telling her story. Zeke's laptop made national headlines for about 5 minutes before being drowned out by bigger scandals. 12 known victims. Lila among them. Most families didn't pursue charges. The man was dead. Case closed, they said. Then Dana got stabbed in prison. Zeke had arranged it, his last act of control. Dana survived, but his kidneys didn't. He'll need dialysis for life. I couldn't even afford the transport to visit. Just listen to his voice on overpriced collect calls while the world moved on.